Hello there, how's it going? My name's Micheal McCann, and I'm really delighted to be reading from Little Acorns Bookstore, new premises on Foyle Street. Thanks so much to Jenny Doherty for having me. So as I said, my name's Micheal McCann. I'm originally from Derry, and I'm living in Belfast where I'm writing a PhD. And I have just published this book, this little pamphlet of poems called Safe Home, that's been published by Green Bottle Press. Yes, anyway, so I'm going to read a couple of poems from my first pamphlet of poems, Safe Home. I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, which is a sequence of poems about playing the violin. Etudes number 1. I'll go to concerts in the Ulster Hall a few times a year to see the violin soloists. My friends think that this is because I want to learn fingerboard electric dashes of the Shostakovich or the Barber, nothing so heroic. I go in the hope that something goes wrong. The gold-plated E-string snapping mid-cadenza, an earring slipping off, bouncing on the chin rest, then the floor. Pop, pop, bang. How these people can deal with disaster at a moment's notice. The string snapping in the middle of a mournful B-section of something Tchaik-like. Could I learn this coping? This next poem I'm going to read is in 2 parts, and it rewrites the Tower of Babel myth from the Bible, in which humans all shared the one language, and God thought they grew too ambitious, so then scattered them and gave us all different languages so we couldn't communicate anymore. But this poem is written, and the loss of a common language is between a father and a gay son who grows into himself in adolescence and loses the shared language that they had together. So it's in 2 parts, and the first part's before the tower falls, and the second part's after. Babel, just before, just after. 1. Then I had no fair ringlets budding from my flower-bed chest. My father returned from the sight each night, bare-chested, eyes hooded, his hand reaching forward as I hand him the can, and he laughs in bat disturbing booms. And he's been wearing a dust sheet as a cape this entire time. Let's fly, he said, and he washes his hands in watery vinegar. The mortar goodbyes into the running water. I wasn't allowed to watch him work, higher and higher, and even my owl friend stopped circling after long. While he worked, the washing damp, the postcard unsent, the wildflowers everywhere. Oh, colour. I visit my father in a dream. I fidget at the tower base. He is strong, sure, and never tires. He places bricks like me into bed, and he won't stop reaching, sweaty and flower-crowned, until he arrives at the pale, empty moon, satisfied. Number 2. Then the bricks fell from the sky, sounding like fire, oh, plunge my eyes, or maybe incredible head trauma. And my da watches his work, weeping stars, wondering what I'd think, or newly who I was becoming. Our words remained the same, but I grew confused in my greenery when Daddy offered how to emulsify the wall for painting, when I asked about prep, when I asked how to love when they have the same. My dad would shout for something from the garage, but the smell of paper distracted me. A drill, a beer, a hand pressed into Daddy's hand. My voice to him, the same indistinct rumble as his through the sad veins of the house. 2 voices, one low, one deepening, hugging the walls, vibrating for help. This next poem is called Fried Egg Sandwich. I wrote it at the very start of the lockdown in March or April, and it's about the language we carry from those close to us. So my friend's Canadian, so I started carrying a Canadian take when I spoke. It's called Fried Egg Sandwich. Ellen, the night has been at the unlocked door since you left and isn't going away, despite my loud reading about somewhere, anywhere else Your face has become acquainted with my worn, parked phone screen, sanctuary spilling out. Let us be courageous, you would say. Birdsong pecks through my rudimentary speakers, and whiskers of garnet flowers bob behind you. I'm there and never have been there. I've begun to say man when I mention a person or conclude a tough day, breathing out quietly. I've internalized how you speak, we live our love, and take you with me as I unlock the front door to find a carton of fresh eggs. Oh man, I'll say, as one breaks, it laughing over my jorts. Oh man, I'll say, as an afternoon rain comes on over my yard. And if it blesses yours too, do you have that huge parka that Joni is playing from the radio inside so faintly she could be confused for hope? This is a poem I wrote called Leaving London for Belfast, and it's for my partner Andrew. Rather be parochial than suitcase weary, and tie bonded, and slow to laugh, and desperate to walk the opposite direction quickly. Rather be coastal than coughing, slow in our going than quiet with wanting. Bless this plane, carrying us over what we cannot swim. My tired thighs hear where we're going over the tannoy, and I can hear Jo Stafford smiling as she sings. I missed you. I hope for a life vest under my seat to realise I was wearing it all along. A lot of the poems in this pamphlet, in some way, shape or form, look at safe spaces and making safe spaces, especially if you're an LGBTQ person. So this next poem is for my younger brother, and it is inspired by the gaming phenomenon Minecraft, in which he creates his own city, and I envy that kind of power that I had as a child and I don't have anymore. So it's an apology to him, and it's called Apology. Sleep is not answering the phone, while the directors of our terrain, we imagine them as coyotes in carrot-coloured pantsuits. Ignore the line that runs red hot along the gated field by our house. You, fireboy, lavish inside. The day's sun knocks against your drawn curtain, and from the outside your room flashes with strobe bang brilliance. An Irish heat distorts the pavement, but fear not, you are building a city. This room you game in, your bolt hole was mine long ago, but I lost the deed. Keep it, and keep your hands moulded around what allows control of your world. When I roar about reading or wild herbs, I only envy this wonderful new world you craft. Its crystal blue water, how the villagers shout hail to everyone. This world, built block by grassy block, gold brown truffles, fish leap the river. Your brow is smooth, no telltale furrow. I pull the curtain tighter, settle to watch. Looking down, absently, into a train table, like it'll tell me. A phone's black mirror lets downcast eyes see sheep gutty clouds in an August sky in the glass of a locked phone. Turning upward to the real thing, my eyes are lit. So I'm going to read some newer stuff now. I'll start with a short one. This poem's called 3 a.m. It's a very short poem. And it happened when a long delayed conversation happened, and we realised the sun was rising, and a friend of mine said something very funny, and I thought about it and wrote this poem. So it's called 3 a.m. The day's light had exited without our notice because we were blocked. The slow berry gin flowed like a long delayed conversation. When we realised the time and the dark sky, you rose and gasped from an ajar window. Patches of starling blue, signalling tomorrow. You said, "The sun is rising, thank God, as though he had remembered something incredibly important and would forget it by the morning. I, like a lot of people, dabbled in baking over the past half year, not so successfully, as you might ascertain from this next poem. An attempt at muffins. Freakish and bulbous in proportion, these creations sit in turtle formation, spilling from their scallion-pressed casing, in a wardrobe of pink, deep reds, and orange. Overcooked, they grew too ambitious. They escaped their paper enclosures, like people leaving the bar, going home. In absence of a drying rack, the lack of preparedness here is unimportant. These hard-to-the-touch monarchs respire quietly on a borrowed chopping board. There is raisins and chocolate submerged somewhere within them, but I'd sooner eat my lover's organs. I say all this to say I destroy all I have. These second heads they have grew tumorously under heat. The muffins seem nonplussed. They look pretty. A failed attempt was a fair crack at it. My coffee machine burps in a way that sounds like affirmation. I, some fool, appraise them with bird-like amusement one morning, but as they who watch me hitting each wall of this kitchen. My long brown hairs now gather in corners of each room. They know more of contentment. A week or so later, I have given up waiting and I'm shaving back floorboards to see what thrives underneath them. And those muffins, at ease, humming a little like small terracotta guardians, showing me another way. This next poem is called Ormeau Park, after the park in Belfast. Characteristic rain in June falls like translucent pearl lame. The shower is light enough that a few walkers brave those neon raincoats. A plucky robin perceives its territory like a brass instrument, the orchestra. Of all the paths that worm through the park, mine is sheltered on each side by trees. The rainwater puddles shimmer as I pass like television static, or the revelation we needed. A pair of dogs and a pair of middle-aged men amble past. They incline their head, sharing a rollie. A door I haven't knocked on in a long time comes to mind. The robin suggested it. The trees on either side of the path link hands above me. We're not here for long. This poem is called Calf, and it's about visiting a gravesite. Calf, the evening gloated with a fine mizzle as I came to see you. Still no grass grown overhead, but the exposed earth breathed deep and drank well. A queer smattering of hail-alls peek up around you like watchful gnomes. I remember a book that refers to these purple kisses as Heart of the Earth. Anyway, a troop of brown and fair cows munch in the adjacent field, and a calf with a semicircle of cedar hair that could have been a glam fringe before the Irish white of its face began. It watches me for a second or so, some leaves and stems falling from its still mouth, before it leaps and bolts half a field away, as though it was just so funny. The others didn't even pause. Silly calf, bounding away with a yelp, as though I, or what I was seeing, was unbearable. This next poem is written for the American poet Marie Howe. It's called Accident, and it's about how dogs are better than us, I think. Accident for Marie Howe. Oh Marie, you were right about the laundry. I had just dressed my weak-kneed clothes horse, and already another load was spinning and soaked through. I lifted the gangly rack to carry it elsewhere. These clothes that will me through long days seem wrinkled and exhausted, clinging by their fingertips to metal rungs. In their anxious wobble, the silk shirts hid my golden friend, lying guard just outside the utility. My foot pressed sharply onto his haunch and upper tail, and we both recoiled from the other, yelping. Underwear flying. But Marie, something happened as I hurt him. At the same time, he was groaning with a sore, wagging tail. He was inclining his head to fit my apologetic hands. How he looked at me, how blazingly brown his eyes were as he watched me approach and injure him, and how he limped closer, the sting not quite gone, as though I was the one who needed comfort. It took the longest time for me to understand how a wound can smart like a kiss, how little I knew. This poem kind of speaks back to the kind of, in poetry, the idea of making something mean something else. I lived with my godmother for a while, and she lives in Michigan, outside Balmoney, and there's like a constant evensong of sheep, and I spent one evening wondering what I could make that be in a poem, and that's where this poem came out of, because perhaps we don't have to make stuff mean something else. Sheep chorus, the Shigan. Even toward midnight, the fields bleat their discord. These swathes of sheep have things to address tonight. I sit by a well-varnished window to hear this evensong, like mass, as a draconian moth, peppered but mostly white across its thorax, hovers around an outside light, humming. The moth is furry in its largeness, like a horror, like a white corpse all lesioned. And I'll write later how those Claddagh and Galways and Cheviates are a lost city, broiling with languages I've never heard. Bah, wee Grace reminds me. They go, bah, do you remember? Grace, I had forgotten what with all the coffee and sadness. One passes, its wool is white, and muck dresses its underside. It stands a little apart from the rest of them. How have we been hurt that we must make this mean something else entirely? Oh, for some human sleep, no, sheep left to their own blessed devices. And still, the blonde dog dips its muzzle into a bowl, lapping like a heart. Were it that words were sufficient, were it that they could save us, and were no mere transport to safety. Okay, so I'm going to read this poem from my pamphlet called Man and Woman. I was at the Europa bus station, and I saw a young couple necking, and that's a lot more, it's like a more difficult, more weighted conversation or decision to make if you're an LGBT person, and not something that's always the safest thing to do depending on where you are. So this is a poem that thinks about that, and that's where this is the poem where the pamphlet gets its title from. Man and Woman. The bus resigns to leave its Belfast bed, burdened by pages and appointments, with a familiar given up sigh, as my eyes come to a pair on the platform, hugging all Jack and Rose, soft, dry hump-like, sparkling and safe and dry. A plague of pigeons watch via Galilean binoculars. I hate them, how carelessly they... A woman with dark jewels presses her form against his front, firm, holding and terrifying. No, this rage-fired view isn't fair. I want this. The theatre of half-missed kisses in the pain of the grey hour outside the Europa, not anticipating the glimmer of fags or the tight-coloured relative eyeing a grazing tongue as they smell their way for some mint tea. Why garden? Bulbs full of light, trouble, when this safe home could be a bus station, the concert line, walking the longest bridge in town. But the quiet garden is ours alone. We develop, us lucky many, a new way of things, a new dramatic theory, quiet, there. A tree leans to the plain song of two similar-sized, sure hands. I lower a book on optimism onto my groin and call him. Phone stalls, call his name, laugh at the wind, hold me closed a while, and this next poem is kind of one of the more surreal, imaginative poems in the pamphlet. My father used to be a scuba diver and stopped whenever I was born. And this poem kind of imagines or follows him down into a wreck called the William Mantle that lies off the coast of Malin. So I'm going to read that. The 10 metres you can see is the unbearable part, I argue. At least above water, you'd see things coming. Knowing I'm wrong, knowing sight is no pal in a knife fight. The real trouble is being bone dry. And the man of war somehow sneaks up on you, and for no reason, your form, just full of light, calls, come in, to the overly motherly jellyfish. Your diving stopped while I was still swimming, after a fashion, but your eyes, lit like rose glass, recounting how brilliantly fired a wreck looked in the failing summer. Hull plates and decking have rotted into the sand, so only rusted ribs, framework, mooring bollards resist your body, neoprene smooth, entry to Atlantis. You descend slowly from a world of clamour into one of deep, fruiting silence. The late afternoon uncovers the furore of red and purpling anemones, dead man's fingers waving back. In the warm blue darkness of the hull, the silty floor is alive with lost jewels, scintillating, slinking past each other on the hull floor. Light peaks from rotted holes above your head. As you slow to a still float, a theatre of silt takes its turn. Your head pivots wing to wing, this place like earth but flipped. I smell your father smoking in the captain's plush cabin, door locked, and the giant, probably blue lobster you heard rumours about is nowhere to be seen or heard clack clack snapping, but you do see two claws reaching kindly from a hole in the wall. A dinner plate of a crab, fallen in when it was smaller, sprightly, nooked, and grew too grand. In its trapped rest, it felt like God. Now it has outgrown its haven, as you have this adrenaline fix. And you rise to the surface despite your limbs' nitrogen ache. Do you mourn the passing of your underworld? I'm so sorry. It was the first way I made things difficult. I suppose this poem is me trying to resurrect your beneath. You say one pitch night that you might take the notion to dive again, and I am haunted in sleep by purple waves broiling with talk, and your smiling, cowl-pinched face, your suited feet first breaking the waves. A diving knife in one hand, the other slashed from a sharp, wise coral. You're on the wood boat, with both bone-hilt oars accounted for. The last thing my eyes remember before I surface into the unbearable. A flat, strong hand pointed to me, rising up and down, meaning stay calm, I'll be okay. This poem I'm going to end with is in the pamphlet as well, and there used to be an old cash converter years ago on Shipquay Street, and I think I was 4 or 5, and I was with my father and I stole a small Pikachu from a cash converter. My dad furiously had to pay for it and then chased me down like a kind of Christmas slippery Shipquay Street. So I wrote this poem called The Man with His Child in His Eyes. Oh, some December when I was small, wavy, when things might only hurt for a while, Derry was lit and springy. Street lights were rung round by wind-strung tinsel. The city may have been wrapped in heating filaments, keeping everything flirting with boiling. A not so bad winter has ordained the spired city with more palatable discontents. Finance, the sadnesses of Christmas, youth, weaning. I was 4 and knew even then that what I needed was not words or money, so I took the yellow mouse with red cheeks and ran from the shop. My father was cross and embarrassed and spent the walk back to the car trying to conceal the cheek-slashing grin as some furrowed grimace. Driving back along the foil, the city of spires lets us go. An innocent shoplifter and his accomplice, the robin still attempting the effacing of a freckle-stretching grin. As precious as Mavillion sea glass, beer bottle bottoms transformed in the happy carnage of the sea. Charmed by boldness, wee man, he loves bold bastards. Singular bastard, mind this as you go. Daddy's stepping thigh deep into the lacquer, and his waiters catch Donegal rubies, or are they salmon roe in the water that runs like your heart? Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a lovely evening.